on here? What is this trust? Can you give me an example of a trust? Do you know any trust in the world? Yes, David. OPEC is a good example. What tell us about OPEC? So basically, major oil-producing countries in the world decide how much oil they're going to produce. Each of them, each has got a quota, and they're going to collectively decide exactly what the price is. Right? So that is a collusive relation that is not competitive. It's a collusion among capitalists to determine how much each shall produce and what the price shall be. Right. So this is what is happening with this concentration of capital. There is in fact, you can just write it underneath it, imperfect competition. The development of joint stock companies, shareholding companies. That's also an indication of concentration of capital, but more important is trusts that organize a particular sector. Sometimes it was argued, for example, that in the automobile industry, where there's only 3 or 4 major companies producing cars, there is an implicit sort of cartel, because they are so implicitly organizing the industry. They do share a common interest in not driving themselves to their death. Trusts. So, yes. Right. Yes. And what else happens? So the formation of trusts, as a result of these crisis of reductions, the concentration of capital is imperfect competition, the development of these trusts, cartels, collusion. What happens next, according to Engels? Sorry? Internal division. Within joint stock companies. Well, yes, he says that's right. When there is a new crisis, sometimes they can fragment again. They can start competing. But overall, there's another completely different shift. What other entity begins to become... Yes, Greg? Monopolies develop, yes, but a particular... Yes, Anders? The state actually enters. State, have you got a page number? The state becomes state ownership. 710, sounds good. State ownership, 710. 71011, right at the bottom, right? Yes, the very bottom of 710, that's 2 lines. Engels says, in any case, with trusts or without the official representative capitalist society, the state will ultimately have to undertake the direction of production. This necessity for conversion into state property is felt first in the great institutions for intercourse and communication, the post office, the telegraphs, and the railways. Well, in this country, relatively little is owned by the state, but in Europe, there has been a long history of nationalized industries, coal industry, post office. Well, this is post office in this country is, just insofar as it still survives, the US post office is a state-owned organization. Right? Railways. Well, the whole problem in this country, there is no state ownership of railways as far as I know. We just have Amtrak. Yeah, don't laugh. Yes. But in many countries in Europe, well, of course, in many countries in Europe, the railroads are still nationalized. What's the story in Norway? They're nationalized. Post office nationalized. What about things like electricity and... Not now. It's been privatized. And even Norway's going down this road. But what happened today? What happened yesterday? Vegeta.
The stock markets fell under 10,000.
Yes. And what has happened as a result of that? What's the state doing? Oh.
It was like, are they going for the state treasury was talking about buying stakes in the banks?
Yes. Very good, Vegeta. Yes. Very good indeed. Yes, so the state is what? It's thinking of what? Taking over the banks. You see, what was interesting, what was fascinating about the response of the state in this case was to just hand over the money to the banks so that they could absorb their bad debt. And that spun out of control, and now they are thinking about what they should have thought long before, namely nationalize the banks. So they are now finally talking about taking over the banks, because that is the only way they will control it. So we see right in front of our nose precisely what Engels is talking about. The state will inevitably, in crises, begin to take over different parts of the economy, and the banks in particular. And that, of course, there's a bit more important factor in the European response to this crisis, is to take over the banks. In 1992, there was a major financial crisis in Sweden, and immediately the Swedish state just took over the banks, bought out the banks. They argue, economists say it would have cost us $4 trillion to buy up the banks. Well, they spent $700 billion. Just another 5 times as much, and they would have been, they could have nationalized. And probably would have saved us a bit of a crisis. Anyway, they've been reading Engels. There's probably somebody here who's from the Treasury Department who's leaking information back. Yes. But anyway, look, so, very good. So what does Engels say? Crises of overproduction lead to concentration of capital, imperfect competition, joint stock companies, trusts, and eventually state ownership. But is this a transition to communism by itself? Engels says no. He says, look, on the bottom of 711. 2, 4, 5 lines from the bottom on page 711. The more the state proceeds to the taking over of productive forces, the more does it actually become the national capitalist. The more citizens does it exploit. The workers remain wage workers. They remain proletarians. However, and this is this is the clincher, the capitalist relation is not done away with. It is rather brought to a head. But brought to a head, it topples over. The state ownership of the productive forces is not the solution of the conflict, but concealed within it are the technical conditions that form the elements of that solution. Well, the solution is going to be over here. Okay, so far so good. What we have a situation now of the state becoming the national capitalist, imperfect competition. But what is happening down here? Class struggle leads to what? According to Marx and Engels. Chelsea. What goes here? Crisis deepens, state takes over the means of production. What is here? Class struggle leads to class struggle until eventually, yes, Rosa?
The consciousness develops?
Yes, that's around here. And then finally, as a result of the consciousness developing, revolution, and which is expressed by what happens in the revolution? Hands up, what happens in the revolution, Rosa?
We take control of the means of production.
What were you?
The proletariat takes the state.
Very good. The proletariat seizes state power, and through that controls the means of production. Yes, don't look at me so strangely. This does happen. Proletariat, that's of course what happened in the Russian Revolution. Proletariat seizes state power. State power. It could happen tomorrow. Yeah, state power. Yes. Now, the question is, how do you go from class struggle to the proletariat seizing state power? It has to become, indeed, a revolutionary class. What's in here? Well, was it Rosa who talked about rising consciousness? What is happening here? How this working class, before it seizes state power, it has got to actually imagine that it is powerful. It has got to sense that it can indeed control production. What is happening here? What is shaping the consciousness? How does the working class change as the class struggle proceeds? You see? And here's the puzzle. We have said all along, we have insisted all along, that exploitation under capitalism is what? Invisible. They don't see it. But something starts to happen. Something starts to happen with these crises on the top here. Something starts to happen with these crises up here. What happens according to Engels? What's your name? Nicole.
The proletariat gets larger and larger.
The proletariat is getting larger and larger. Yes, that's absolutely the case because, so there's the middle strata are disappearing. So they can look up there and they see, what do they see up there?
Rich people.
Rich people. But what else do they see up there?
Wealth,
yes. But what else do they see up there? Simeon.
The state and the invading socialistic society.
Right, but what else? What are these rich people they see up there? What are they doing, those rich people up there?
Freaking out.
Are they freaking out? Yeah, they are freaking out now. But what else how do people look at those people up there? Yes, Lauren.
Is it when they see, like, the small group versus their enormous group?
Yes, they can see there's a small group. They knew that all along, actually. They knew that all along. But something is becoming certainly very clear as they look up there. Yeah. Neil.
You cannot see it if they're being exploited.
But why? Yes, very good. Why, Mari, are they seeing that they can be exploited?
Because now they're like seeing the actual modes of production and understanding.
Yes, but what? Yes, but why exactly? But what are they seeing up there, Juliana?
Things that they want. Well, they see things that they want too.
Yeah, no, they've always seen up there things that they want too. But something, look, there's crisis upon crisis. We're in a situation now, crisis. What do people think about those Wall Street bankers? Those Wall Street bankers. Yes, Chelsea.
That they're not being affected by the crisis the same way.
They are not being affected by the crisis in the same...
With the fact that they can...
What are these Wall Street bankers doing? What are they doing? What are they actually doing? What are they doing? Yeah, tell me. What are they doing, Jenny?
They're finding ways to keep the money among themselves.
Yeah, they're keeping money amongst themselves, but they're not doing anything. They are just coupon clippers. They're just cashing in on their investments. That's what Engels is saying. That basically what becomes clear as soon as you get these trusts, joint stock companies, that the capitalists are just share owners and they just pocket money. They do nothing. They are superfluous. They are superfluous. The caps are superfluous. Who needs coupon clippers? Engels says. We'll read it in a second. Who needs who? Basically, what has happened is capitalism before had these what were capitalists doing before? Before the joint stock companies. Capitalists were also managing their firms. They were doing something. They were organizing production. But now, Sue, we have a whole new capitalist class, basically of share owners, people who invest and who get returns on the investment. They are coupon clippers, dividend mongers. Right. And we don't need them to keep capitalism going. They're doing nothing. We don't need them. We can expel. That's what the working class is thinking. We don't need those bankers. Yes, well, those bankers, we actually do need them. But anyway, we need banks anyhow. Right. But anyway, Engels is saying that this concentration of capital, the rise of trusts and share-owning companies, joint stock companies, indicates that capitalists, we don't really need them. They're superfluous. They're just cashing in. They're just share owners. They don't manage. They don't do anything. Not only are they superfluous, but what else do they do, these capitalists? They generate what? They generate crises, and they sort of create this panic. They create unemployment and poverty and degradation. That's capitalism is going into these crises all the time, and therefore not only are they superfluous, but these capitalists are incompetent. We don't need them, and on top of that, they're incompetent. Caps are incompetent. Where does Engels say this? Am I making this up? Julia? Oh, that's interesting. 717, yeah.
First full paragraph. 3, the fourth line down, and the end, the bourgeoisie demonstrated to be a
Well, hold on, I'm not with 717. Yes, under that, I see it. Section D, it's called.
Yes.
Fourth line into that, the bourgeoisie demonstrated to be a superfluous class. Well, yeah. So if we read the sentence before that, and the whole section D, this is a summary. Partial recognition of the social character of the productive forces forced upon the capitalists themselves. Taking over of the great institutions for production and communication, first by joint stock companies, later on by trusts, then by the state. The bourgeoisie demonstrated to be a superfluous class. All its social functions are now performed by salaried employees. And, okay, very good, that's 717, that's a summary. But before 717, anybody found anything? Sonny. 711.
First new paragraph.
Okay. Sienna, can you read that? 711. First new paragraph. Fourth line from the top. All right, loud and clear.
If the crisis demonstrate the incapacity of the bourgeoisie for managing any longer modern productive forces, the transformation of the great establishment for production and distribution into joint stock companies, trust and state properties shows how unnecessary the bourgeoisie are for that purpose.
Aye, so they're both incapable, incompetent, and superfluous. So the working class begins to realize, don't need capitalists, and they're making a mess of things, so we will seize power, and Bob's your uncle, incomes, we will seize state power and take over the means of production, and Bob's your uncle comes communism. That's right, just like that. Bob's your uncle, communism. It's called a Bob's your uncle theory of communism. You don't know that expression? Very important one. Yes. So, on page 713, Engels talks about the proletariat seizing state power, and so what happens? The seizing state power, we got this, seizing state power, introduces communism, and what is this communism? What are the characteristics of this communism according to Engels? Okay, yes, Jenny? Abolition of private property, and abolition with private property goes with what? Abolition of classes. Very good. Basically, it is the repression, expulsion of the capitalist class, and the end of all classes because of the common ownership. Now, no common ownership of the means of production. Yes, means of production. What else does Engels say about this communism? Yes, Josephine. Have you got a quote? We're on Engels now. What does it actually say in the text here? He says something like that. You could say. Yes, Saunders. Yes, the state withers away. That's an interesting idea. The state. We're going to have to figure out what the state is next time, but the state withers away. What does that mean, do you think, Anders? What does it mean to say the state withers away? Yes, but all right, if we don't have the state, what do we have? There's a wonderful passage, a very famous passage on 713 that Engels talks about. Let me read it to you. From the bottom of the page, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 lines from the bottom of the page. Why don't you read it out, Anders?
11 lines?
Yes, state interference.
State interference.
Can you speak up so I can hear you? I'm getting deaf, I'm an old guy.
State interference in social relations becomes, in one domain after another, superfluous, and then dies out itself.